Welcome to Building While Flying, a Sasha Group podcast where we interview business leaders about how they tackle challenges, stay resilient, and navigate ever-changing skies.
I'm Maribel Lara, SVP and Head of Consulting at the Sasha Group. I'm so glad to be back for another episode of Building While Flying. My guest today is Sarah Apgar, founder and CEO of FitFighter, a global fitness brand that delivers a transformative strength system rooted in her own innovation, the Steel Hose. Sarah's an Iraq veteran, All-American athlete, fitness professional, volunteer firefighter, and mom of 2 girls. Sarah and FitFighter have been featured in Muscle and Fitness, Rolling Stone, ESPN, and Men's Health, among other critical acclaim. Sarah promotes the power of teams, women leaders, and public service, contributing a portion of sales to the Tunnel to Tower Foundation. A lot for us to unpack there, so it's going to be hard to pick and choose which things to focus on. But Sarah, let's start by answering the question, what is FitFighter?
FitFighter, as you noted in your introduction, and thank you, I'm delighted to be here with you, such a treat for me, is a strength system that had its origins in the U.S. Volunteer Fire Service. And I was solving a very simple problem, which was to train firefighters better for the rigors of the fire ground and to use a tool that we use as the lifeline of the fire ground, which is fire hose, to train for skills training, for hose handling, movement, work capacity, building strength and endurance. This is so unique in the fire service, even against military, which, as you noted, I also have in my background. And we realized as we started to work with this unique tool that this had thousands of applications beyond just for firefighters to any demographic aged 8 to 80 who needs an accessible, fun, unique strength training system that's safe and highly effective and also evidence-based, because we know now that instability, strength training is actually, the most effective way for us all to train strength into our bodies. So we quickly expanded from working with firefighters to working with just about anybody, from the home fitness setting through to professional athletes.
All right. And how long have you been at this?
So originally, the very first steel hose I made in my garage back in 2013. So it's been almost 9 years since that time.
Wow.
But people sort of see, I think, the last 3 years since we launched the company into the mainstream fitness industry, and they think, wow, sort of an overnight project.
Right.
But it's fun to sort of note that, this is actually almost a decade long in terms of the spirit and the roots of the innovation.
Yes, I think that's so. I had breakfast with another entrepreneur, and I was like, write it all down, because looking back at it later, right, and I think it'll be funny to see what it is, but folks don't see the starting point. So we're going to talk some more about that. But before we get to it, I think entrepreneurs are cut from a different cloth. And I'd love to see sort of what the similarities are, or, what characteristics different entrepreneurs bring to the table. So what should we know about you and what makes you you?
Thank you. It's a lovely question. I would say 3 things, which I think is commensurate with your, what do entrepreneurs share? The first one is a pretty stubborn curiosity. So I've always been, with both people and also, anything that's physical, like a physical product or an idea. I've always been very curious, and I just love to learn about people. I love to learn about new ways of doing things and new processes and new tools and trinkets. And that's just the way I've always been. And in my professional life, I found actually that physical products, things that we can see, touch, and feel, has also been a theme for me.
Okay.
What you didn't know in my background is that I spent 5 years at Warby Parker as my first professional pursuit after I graduated from Tuck. And so I've always felt like that curiosity of just asking one more question when you think all the questions are done, or exploring one more, process or sort of train of thought when you thought you had exhausted all, is probably number one. Number 2 is a focus on the village, the support system around you. So I've always maintained this, a really deep and focused circle of friends and family that are, 12 ish sort of folks who are really those inner circle people who know everything about you, everything about your journey, and are always sort of the phone call away, at 2 a.m. type people.
Yep.
And because entrepreneurship is a very lonely adventure, which I'm sure you've heard from your other guests, that is so important because the power of teams is, one of the things that I espouse to, that we all should appreciate more. And it's ironic that as entrepreneurs, a lot of times it can be a pretty lonely journey. Yeah. And so that is probably number 2. And the second thing is a tolerance for risk that I think is highly unique. And at times, I think, probably something that, people could question. If you look at, the entrepreneurs that become well known in the mainstream.
Right.
Those are, the Elon Musks of the world. There's an extreme tolerance for risk, right? Financial risk, public risk, social risk. Obviously, it doesn't have to be to that extent, but I do think that, the ability to see the horizon when maybe you're not sure how to get there and to take that financial risk and, the business risk is something, and the social risk is something that's very important.
That echoes through and through, I think, definite similarities with other conversations I've had, even like the acceptance of failure, right? And that you will fail at certain things, even if you don't fail at the overall pursuit. And that element of the power of team and that searching for community came through in your personal story. My understanding is that's why you joined volunteer firefighters where you were living, is because you were looking for that sense of team and community you had when you were in the military and seeking another element of that. So I think that is unique, not necessarily consistent, but I think really unique and comes through in how you built FitFighter. So let's get into the specifics of that. There's an innovation in product that I sort of spoke to at the beginning, but I also think there's innovation in how you talk about incorporating weights in fitness and this idea of like moving with weight as opposed to just lifting up and down. And when I was reading that in our producer's notes, I was like, oh, that clicked for me and sounded like something I hadn't really heard before. So I think there's innovation in your approach to the utilization of the product as well. But let's talk about the product first. So this idea of stubbornness and this idea of curiosity for product and how it works. When you haven't been an entrepreneur, right, I think, as the outsider looking in, you can think you get to a product and you say, I have this idea for a product, I will pay someone to build this for me, right, or come up, and it's so often not that, because that can be a pretty pricey pursuit. So let's talk about how you got to what the product is today.
So when I was looking for tools in the firehouse to use to train specifically for this hose handling skill, which is so awkward and so unlike anything else that we do in our daily lives, it was obvious to me that the place to start with was fire hose. But what I didn't realize is, as I started to tinker with how to recreate and really truly mimic the feeling of that hose line charged with water, so meaning coming from the hydrant under high pressure and imbalance and awkward with all 150 feet of hose behind us, that was the hard part, was how do we solve that training problem, you know? And so this is where the sort of stubbornness comes in. I started to fill fire hose with anything that I could find, indoors and outdoors. So with pebbles and with sand and with different kinds of grit and, coal slag. And I have a box. It's very fun. I should have brought it in here. I have this box that's about this big of probably 25 different types of materials that I had started to compact into these pieces of hose. And I started with very long pieces of hose, thinking, well, that's the best way to mimic hose line, is to have, the sort of 30 feet behind us. But then I realized that actually if we shortened up these pieces and we started to compact these materials inside them, and then we could always link them together and we could always create a longer piece, but we had this beautiful, highly simple and very effective tool at training this one skill. And so I finally settled, after about 2 years of tinkering with the filler materials, on a very small 1 millimeter steel shot. It's perfectly round. And so this compacts into the fire hose, creates this new form factor for a free weight that is comfortable to grip, and it keeps its shape so it won't kink the way that sand would or these different grits or pebbles. And all of a sudden, we realized that we had this totally new form factor for a free weight, which, when you think about it, hasn't changed in hundreds of years. Dumbbells look very similar today, the way they look 1,000 years ago.
Maybe different colors, but that's about it.
Right. And so it's amazing that in a world where we're constantly innovating, actually, if you think about it, you know, in exercise, and specifically in weightlifting and strength training, we haven't had a lot of innovation to say, what's a better way to move weight? And so that was the steel hose innovation, I would say, became its current commercial product over a span of about 5 years. And then I felt like we really had something that had brought, you know, something commercial to the market that could be distributed and widely utilized, you know, across all these different demographics that we have now.
So you said it right in your description just now, moving weight. So let's talk about that, because that to me, that really is another innovation. It's what is unique about FitFighter, right? Like, you could have named the company Steel Hose, but it's not about the product. It's sort of about the program and what you do with the product. So talk some more about that, because, right, we're a marketing firm at the end of the day. We do consulting and marketing, and so much of that is finding the unique way to talk about who you are, what you do, and get that across to a community. And you're in a really crowded space, right? The fitness space is incredibly crowded, maybe got even more crowded over the last 2.5 years. Where folks have been looking for more options at home. So tell us about that and sort of how you landed on how different this was.
Yeah, when I started to work with Steel Hose at first, I really, you know, because we were sort of we were in a niche, right? It was very narrow, the way that we were thinking about the application of the tool. And fast forward now, when I work with Steel Hose, it's almost like a fifth limb. It's like it's a feeling that, you know, moves with it's something tangible and physical, but moves with your body, around your body, in your hands, and layered in all different ways, in a way that I've never felt before as a collegiate athlete. Right. You know, I was a military gal in my first career, you know, firefighter. I love sports, you know, individual sports, team sports, you name it. I'm an outdoors person. I love mountain biking. And so I've always been into strength training. But I had never felt the awareness of my strength and of specific parts of that. For example, your grip strength, which is widely known to be one of the biomarkers of our long-term health. Some people don't know that, but your grip is an indication of your long-term, your longevity, your lifespan. The stability that you have. We talk about, you know, core blaster workouts, but in the end, what we're really talking about is a stability in your trunk, like your foundational part of your body from which all of your extremities exude. And so that's the most important thing to make us strong. But when we're isolating that and we're not also recruiting our hands and our arms and our legs and our glutes, you know, and our head and our eyes and our, you know, our sort of proprioception and sensitivity to that movement, we're really not. We're sort of just like mindlessly, you know, moving our bodies up and down and placing weight and lifting weight in ways that is not representative of what we need in our lives. Gotcha. And that's for 99% of us. I mean, certainly there are elite athletes who have very specific needs and who train with coaches who are, you know, every little movement is highly tailored to something they do. And for that, traditional weightlifting and strength training absolutely has its place. For the large majority of us, we just want to feel strong moving around every day. We want to be able to, on a whim, you know, run up the stairs to grab something we forgot. Yep. We want to be strong giving a sales pitch, you know, sitting at our desk, have good posture. We want to feel good. We want our faces to, you know, light up with expression and gesture in a way that feels powerful. All these things are really generated from this inner strength and these ways we think about strength that have not become the mainstream lexicon for what to be strong really means. We do have a great movement, I think, in the industry of, strong is the new pretty, right? Strong is the new beautiful. Absolutely, we're sort of seeing that creep in, but we haven't redefined what that strength really is and means, even from like a basic anatomical perspective. So when we talk about moving weight and building real strength, we're legitimately talking about like an evidence-based, consideration around what real strength actually is, and that's grip strength, trunk stability, and the ability to, react and have a sensitivity to our bodies in a way that we've just never thought about lifting weight. So that's what I'm trying to do, is to actually meaningfully, give people a tool that's going to, for a lot of people, for the very first time, make them feel like they understand why they should be lifting and moving weight, and what strength feels like if they've never lifted weight before and moved weight. And what it feels like to actually achieve, those results, which until now have been a lot still about sort of physical results and, about our muscles and about, looking good and things that are quite external. It's much harder for us to show the world our internal strength and for us to market that, to your point about marketing. So this is a harder path, right, to do what I'm doing. Yep. Because it's an easier path, to market and talk about things that we can more sort of externally and easily see and visibly see, but to talk instead about that sort of intrinsic, internal nature of strength is much harder, but a much deeper and longer term idea. Yeah,
and it sounds like you've started to build quite a community around it, and that community isn't where you started originally, which was firefighters. So talk about that community and what it looks like today.
Yeah, so we have some of the letters that I get, that come into me, literally, Dear Sarah, ... because they've, seen me talk about this on, in the media or on TV or on social media. We'll get people write in saying, hey, I'm a 70-year-old, like just yesterday, I'll cite that example. Yeah. I'm a 70-year-old and I have a fibromyalgia issue and I have arthritis in my fingers, or I'm a veteran who has nerve damage, and so I've struggled to figure out a way to return to strength training and exercise. And thanks so much for, making accessible a tool that I feel like I can now use safely, and I can grip, and I like the way it feels, and, can place it really comfortable in my body. And I felt like now I'm empowered, to get back to who I was. And those are the special letters and times when you realize that our demographic is ranging from teenage athletes to your average fitness enthusiast with a garage gym, to the functional aging community, which we describe, I think, as an interesting term we've now used, but kind of the 55 and over community for whom strength training is the most important, because we start to lose 8% of our muscle mass per decade after the age of 40. So I'm 42, so I'm like, okay, clock's ticking, right? By the time I'm 50, we'll have lost 8% of muscle mass if we're not maintaining our strength. I just want to let that sit for a second, because it's like, and so I usually tell people that, and then I'm like, watch for like a reaction,
Did you hear that?
I'm like, did you get it? Because so I say sometimes in my, in my social and in sort of my lingo that if you believe in brushing your teeth twice a day, and we've convinced you that that's a good idea, you should be moving weight 3 times a week, because it's as well researched. And it's as obvious for your long-term health in the same way this is for your, long-term dental health. And again, just letting that sit, it's kind of like, wow, like we all have an obligation to each other to get each other, strength training.
Yeah. Well, you've convinced me. I'll be ordering as soon as we're done here, and I go back to my computer.
I'm like, how are we doing?
You've got me, Sarah.
So I hope I answered your question. I actually forgot where we started.
Well, we talked about what the community looks like now, right? So it's not just firefighters. You've now got folks from all walks of life. Did you envision that at the beginning?
I absolutely did not. And people, again, that's something that people always think like, wow, we sort of set out and on this to launch a global fitness brand. And I'm like, I can assure you when I was like in the garage tinkering away with like my, sewing machine and all my like coal slags, that this is not what we set out to do. And my youngest daughter was 18 months when I felt like I had had enough of this groundswell coming at me, knocking on my door, saying, we really got something here. We've got a big idea here. It's not fully formed yet, but you started out solving a simple problem for firefighters, and this is a Viagra moment. We've come up with like something that is so beautiful in its simplicity. This is not technologically advanced, right?
But you thought at the beginning this was firefighters?
Definitely. That was where I was going with it, is let's because we were using fire hose, using tools in the firehouse. So let's do something for firefighters based on my background. Makes us a little stronger. And it was really the influx of personal trainers, coaches, folks coming at me, the owner of the Fit Body Boot Camp in Huntington, where we started in the fire department there, who would see us working with the firefighters, and they would start, I think because of their training and expertise, which was not mine at the time, they were the ones that started to kind of knock on my door, wander up and onto the truck ramp or see what we were doing and say, let's put this in our boot camp, circuits. Let's try this out. Let's start to experiment with some things. So I started to experiment with some things, and now everybody's bouncing off of each other, playing around, swinging fire hose everywhere, and realizing, gosh, this is super fun. Like we've stumbled on something that, is a really big idea, and now we just have to start really fully forming that into what that's going to mean for people, how to make it accessible to people, how to bring them the training. What do we want to program? What movements do we want to sort of come out of the gate with? And how do we want to also build this brand? And I would say one thing I didn't mention when we talked about entrepreneurs is the brand building process has probably been the hardest thing for me as an entrepreneur. And I am still working every day at that one, I will say. Because when you do have roots in tactical, the tactical athlete space, and now you've expanded so far from those roots, and you also have something that is so widely applicable to so many people, you also can't be everything to everyone.
Right.
And so we are still in the process now, 3 years in, of really crystallizing, what is it, how to simplify and distill the power of what we have for people in a way that they can feel like they know how to get started.
Yeah, I really do think the first few years of any given brand is when that brand changes the most, right? Because you have your initial vision of who you think the audience is and what need you believe the product is serving or the service is providing, and your eyes get opened up to whether or not that's truly the bullseye or if it was broader or more narrow than you thought. And that requires a shift. And so you really do feel like there's a ton of metamorphosis happening in those first few years. It'll calm down, Sarah, I promise you.
That's really comforting.
I promise you it'll calm down. I mean, I talk about it all the time, but Sasha Group, like who we thought we were going to be when we launched in January 2019 and who we were 6 months later was completely different. Fast forward 3 years, still different. So I assure you it'll calm down and you'll get more clarity as you move forward.
Coming from you, that means a lot because you guys are the experts, so I feel safe with this support and we'll keep you posted.
So you, and we may have covered this, so tell me if we did, but you talked about 3 key pivot points. What were those?
Absolutely, yeah. No, we that's those from a chronological standpoint. We hadn't talked about that yet. So When we first launched, my strategy was to start working, and I should say when we first launched outside of the fire service and started bringing this into the general fitness community. My strategy was to reach out to trainers and coaches that I knew of that were fairly well known in the industry, who I thought would be great for giving product feedback and, helping me to position the steel hose at the beginning. And one thing they advised, and it was great, I had great feedback. They loved the product. We brought a couple celebrity trainers on as partners, and so that was great validation of the idea. One thing we decided is that we wanted to work through channel partners, coaches, the strength and conditioning existing community, to ultimately bring this to the masses. So it was very much a B2B strategy, to work with trusted partners who had their own communities, rather than try to go straight to the consumer in their living room. That's hard. It's expensive. So we spent the first 9 months of our launch, from the summer of 2019 through to the spring of 2020, March of 2020, working with gyms, coaches, and trainers. And we all know what happened to the fitness industry at the time. Everybody went away. And so all of a sudden we were thrust into that sort of all of a sudden sort of upstream effort to provide great home fitness and home strength training, because we had a great product for it and a great philosophy for it, during that time of the pandemic. And because we weren't an established brand and didn't have a lot of awareness, that was actually harder than people think. A lot of people say to me, like, oh man, you guys must have crushed it during the pandemic, Peloton style, because you have a great home fitness product. But gosh, if you're not an established brand that's well known, then it's you against the rest of the world on Instagram. And so we pivoted. That was the first major pivot, was to say, actually that was really I would say the second kind of major pivot. The first being outside of the tactical athlete community and into the fitness community. The second major was then into the home fitness world during the pandemic. We then had this incredible opportunity once we got a phone call from the producers of Shark Tank in May of 2020, and wanting to showcase Fit Fighter on Shark Tank that fall, and so took that opportunity to film in August of 2020, and now 6 million viewers later on ABC Primetime TV in November of 2020, successfully launched into, pretty much thrust into the consumer community that I thought would be 3 to 5 years down the road in terms of strategy. So now I'm scrambling to set up a digital platform for the first time with coached workouts and figure out what the value proposition was to the home consumer, when I had established everything to serve more of the trainer community. So that pivot then sort of thrust us into a second big phase of the business. And then once I was out from sort of underwater after that media moment in the summer of 2021, last year, I said, you know what, this has been an incredible experience. It put us on the map, but I do still really feel like our ability to work with partners that can help us to scale very, very quickly to hundreds of thousands and millions of consumers and put hoses in their hands through these other channels in fitness that was a strategy I started with. I still felt like that made most sense for the business. And so we had a third pretty major pivot last fall back to working with our tactical community, so the fire service and the military, to put steel hose into soldiers and firefighters' hands, just more of them, to working with the enterprise fitness community, like the gym franchises of the world, Anytime Fitness, F45s, the Orange Theories of the world. So we started to really work with a very, high level and sort of scalable franchise type of model, where we would help create solutions for those highly programmed fitness models for people. A lot of them with a very expansive bricks and mortar presence already. And then the third major channel now, of course, is to continue to support our community who like a great home fitness solution. So we do have a new iOS and Android app now out as of September, which we've just relaunched with our coached workouts, our weekly webinars, and that's that membership community that we're now continuing to support. We have 600 members of that community, and as of September. So really working now to grow that into the future on the home fitness side.
So, I mean, just in the course of this conversation, right, there's who your audience is and figuring out, are you going to focus direct to consumer? Are you going to focus on partnerships and thinking about scale? How do you take care of the people who are already part of the community and sort of continue to provide content, which seems to be a critical part of things as well? How do you choose where to focus? Because I think that's a really good just insight for other entrepreneurs as well, because you could get in the weeds in so many areas of the business. How do you at any given point choose where you focus most of your energy and effort?
Disclaimer here is that I'm still working on the answer to that question.
Okay.
But I will offer two salient points around this from my experience in making all of the good, bad, and ugly mistakes. Number one is that you want to quickly get to market with your product and put it into people's hands or your idea so that they can tell you where to focus. So that's something I think people want to wait until things are perfect.
No
right?
such thing.
And then go to market and, explode. And I would tell you exactly the opposite. The more quickly you can get out there in a way that's scrappy, your customer is going to tell you where you need to focus. Great example of that for us is a community such as yoga and Pilates. So never imagined from the firehouse we would end up in the yoga studio, and that's become one of the most interesting market segments we're growing because we have a soft free weight that provides a perfect tool for strength-based yoga and Pilates. Yoga instructors are looking for that and have wood floors in their yoga studios. So just a simple example of that first point. And then the second point is focusing your energy on where I, as the entrepreneur, are strong. So really strong at helping our enterprise clients, for example, to envision how they're going to deploy our programming and training and our products and services into their programs to deliver greater value for their clients, members, and athletes. And so my focus is really on those very high level and very visionary partnerships, sales, and clients, because that's where I'm the strongest. Right. And that really is, I think, in a new business, you are going to end up focusing to an extent where the founder or, the leadership is able to deliver the most value and able to see the most growth and scale so that you can get to a point where you can start to then expand.
All right. Well, I think that's a perfect place to end. I think that's a great takeaway. Thank you so much for coming in today. I got to meet your girls. Yeah, it's been a busy few days for you. So thanks for taking the time for us. I think our listeners are going to get some tremendous value out of it.